meeting, March 3rd, to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome the Board of Selectmen here tonight, and Ricky, the new member.
Hey,
welcome.
Welcome back.
Start with public comment. Is there any public comment? All right. We'll roll into new business. I think the way we should go about this is we'll let Marcia do a presentation, or Steve do the presentation. Then we'll ask questions as needed, and at the end we'll ask the big questions that we have, if we have any, and not really get too far into things tonight until we talk to each department and let them explain before we ask too many questions. How's that? And they'll be redundant to the point of it couldn't be answered. So we'll get, if you have general questions, clarifications to give Marcia and Steve the team to go through it, we'll ask them.
Ask them after your presentation's done or interrupt you.
Whenever.
Okay.
You don't want to forget, so just ask.
I've got it written down.
Okay.
I'd like to start the meeting also by saying I'm very impressed, Steve, with your team's work, the effort that you've all put into this, when we go through it, where we have some discrepancies or not, the effort was solidly there.
Yes.
The support from Marcia and her team and Sue and Harry was greatly appreciated. So I think this is one of the best that I've seen preliminary in a long time.
Yeah, we spent hundreds of hours getting this together, the department heads, Marcia, her team, and we really looked at every single item down to $50. You can see it in your book, and please ask any questions you have as we move along. So I thought what we'd do is give you an overview of what we thought were the most important things, not about the specific budget itself, but the process of getting there. So we started with last year, we put together the 10-year financial plan when we were looking at building a new school, and we wanted to understand for our residents whether or not we could afford a new school, and if we did decide to buy a new school or build a new school, what it would cost and what it would mean for taxes over the next 10 years. And we put that plan together. We plan as a town, I think Sue and Harry agree with me, to follow that financial plan. That financial plan shows what we can do and when we can do it and still have reasonable taxes. Even keeping up with nominal grand list growth rates and things like that. So we use the 10-year projection. That adds in the debt service. It increases the total resources to maintaining the town's capital assets. That's been critical. I think I know the Board of Selectmen, and I think most of the Board of Finance feels that we have not been putting the investments in our capital assets and our capital base that we need to, sometimes just in maintenance. So we're trying to change that. We want to continue to follow the model. I'm not going to read this whole thing. And meet the needs of our citizens from a taxation standpoint and a support standpoint. And we also primarily want to maintain our AAA rating and also get Moody's to move us from AA2 to AA1. And I think the next time we go out to bond, we'll go to Moody's. We'll pay them to do the rating for us. They do not change ratings. If you remember last year, they took off the negative outlook, which was good. But they won't change the rating unless you pay them the $20,000 to do a review. It's kind of a subtle way of earning money without blackmailing somebody.
Is that in the budget?
Right, that would be in next year. So each of the department heads were provided with guidance on what we wanted to see to meet the financial plan, and that was basically spending no more than 1.65% increase in their budgets, aside from salaries, right? So we asked them to do that, and virtually all of their departments were able to meet that goal, and if they didn't, you can see we've got the next forms and we've got the explanations as why the departments were not able to meet that goal. They submitted their budgets to us on January 10th, and we did give them, and you have in your booklets, a next priority form when they asked for something different or something over and above. And the Board of Selectmen made choices as to what we would do, what we would support on those next forms and what we wouldn't support. If we move to the next page, because I'm not going to spend an hour and a half for you guys, it wasn't minutes. So the first selectman, we went through and projected all the revenues, talked to every single department, where do they think the revenues are gonna be next year? Are there any outlier revenues we're gonna see? For example, a Branson, an assisted living, where you can get a very big jump in land use fees, but it's one time. With Branson, it's down this year because a lot of Branson's fees were paid last year, and we projected them for this year. So it's not really a loss, it's a gain in last year, but a down in this year. We've met with every single department head to go through their budgets and their needs. We reviewed those summaries, and we asked them to continually update us if they had changes or additional needs, or they could lower their budget. So they this is a moving target in a sense, that as we get better information, we're adding that to this budget. And we've been doing it even up until last week when we got some new information. If you look at the overall budget drivers on the 10-year model, this is what the 10-year model says we should have, and this is what our proposed budget is. We're under this year by $203,967, the town operations. In the total, I won't go through each one because you can read it yourself, we're 0.61% over what the financial plan is targeting us. That's primarily due to unexpected expenses on the Board of Ed side, the special ed and other items. The debt spending, we're up, bonded capital projects, we're upping that by $564,000, and that's 24.22%. When we look at operating expenditures for the town, we have some new initiatives that we want to look at. Compensation and classification study for certain employee positions. We have done a study, an initial study, using data from the Connecticut Council of Municipalities, who surveys all 169 towns in Connecticut and asks them to list all of the salaries for every single job in that town. So we did an initial survey looking at what our compensation levels are for some of our employees. We took all of the towns between 14 and 20,000 people in a population, and Fairfield County, because we are part of Fairfield County, and compared the salaries. And that showed us that in some cases we think that we need to adjust people's salaries and move them up slightly. But we don't have a super high comfort level with just that one matrix and that one piece of information. So what we would like to do, for 8 to 10 positions, we can hire a company who will go out and do an in-depth study of each position, what it involves, what the responsibilities are, how long the person's been in the job, what kind of benefits they get, what kind of retirement, what kind of medical, so we can really get a feel for what the total package is for each of these jobs, because we know what ours are, and then make a decision, is our employee compensated fairly for the job they're in. That costs about $500 per person. Yes.
Are we having a problem filling those positions, those 8 positions?
No, we don't have, right now we're not. No, right now we're not, but.
Did the initial study show any positions that we are overpaying people? Not that we're gonna reduce
No,
salaries, but.
no, the initial study says some people are right in the median, in the middle, right, within $500 to $1,000 of the median number. The problem that I want to avoid is what happened with our tax assessor. We had a tax assessor we were paying $75,000 a year to. She wanted a big raise, we said no, she left, and now we're paying our tax assessor almost $95,000 a year, 2 years later. We had to hire someone, the lowest salary we could get was $90,000. So I think it behooves us, if we can, to keep people at a level that they want to stay here. And there are some people we have that are very, very good at their jobs that could easily leave us. And do we want to let them leave us and then have to pay $15,000 or $20,000 more to get someone of equal caliber to come back in? So it's constant balance. You know this in your business, right? We look at this very, very carefully. But we're going to do this very systematically, and we're going to do a lot of study before we do that. And so we've put some money in a contingency to cover that, and we would have to come to you for that approval to move that money out. And we would give you the justifications for that at that time.
So that's $4,000.
No,
Or-
the study will be, the study of these job positions will be between $4,000 and $5,000.
Yep.
We have the money to
And
do
you put a
that.
contingency in to give them a raise this year.
Yes, in this upcoming year, right? I'm not gonna go crazy with all these things because you can read. We're doing more work. One thing I did want to mention, With the EMS and fire departments, we're looking much more carefully, and we've taken their budgets, the way they give them to us, and reformatted them in the town's format, so we have similar looking budgets, so it's easier to analyze, easier to work with. We've asked them both, and both of them have worked with us on this to give us an actual spend versus a budget year to date. We have to stop just comparing last year's budget to this year's budget, because we don't know what they spent. And these are separate organizations. They do a great job. They have their own management. They do everything simply. But when the town provides 100% of their operating funds, we need to know that we're spending the money properly. I don't think they're wasting money. I don't think they're doing anything frivolous with it, but we would like to have the detail. And we're working on that very hard. We changed the way we do our regional social services. You know, we donate to Daytar, Women's Hospice. So we asked our Director of Social Services and Senior Center, Ellen Melville, to take that over and do an in-depth analysis of every request. We get about 20 of them every year, a request for funding various not-for-profit groups. And she looked at that and made some recommendations to us after she looked at what they spend, how much of their money goes into the actual program versus salaries, things like that. So we tightened that up a little bit. And this year with the library, we want to fund that third positions that we've been talking about literally for years. And the other thing we were looking at, and Marcia knows a little bit more because she did the depth on this, we won't talk about it right now when we get to that point, is cleaning services. One of the things we found is the library is getting cleaned 3 times a week. On a Saturday and a Sunday, they can have 200 or 300 people in there. They have 1 toilet upstairs and 1 toilet downstairs. We're not cleaning the library at the level we should. Now, particularly with the coronavirus, we need to clean these places. They need to be clean. And so we're proposing that we make a change in the way we do cleaning of all of our buildings to bring a little more structure to it and to understand it better. When we move to the next page, the school budget current year in review, these slides are from the schools. I think you've seen a lot of these slides already, what they're doing and what they want to do. I won't go into great detail on this because I know we're going to do that with the Board of Ed in excruciating detail. These are what they gave us for things that they've done, the year in review, the goals they have for their school budget, right? You know, maintaining class sizes, increasing the educational level of our students, keeping all the resources they need. Again, I won't go through a big one. And then the most important slide, I think, in a way, is their drivers for next year. You know, this is how they broke it out. Contractual inflationary costs, outliers, such as special ed, enrollment-related costs, such as adding a new kindergarten teacher, and investments. And by investments, they mean additional programs that they want to bring out to their students. The school budget reductions, the first selectman reduced the Board of Education's budget from what is almost exactly a 7% increase to a 5% increase when compared to last year's original budget. We did that for a number of reasons, and we'll get into more detail on that as we go through it, but we believe that there are areas within the school budget that they could make cuts that would not affect the school children. In the letter that we sent them today, we sent you all a copy of that, the letter to the Board of Finance. In that letter, we state those areas where we believe they could make significant changes without affecting children and having still an acceptable, good budget that educates our children, but is still responsible to the voters of the town. So what we did is we spent an incredible amount of time over, and Marcia and Kevin did most of this. We asked the school board and Ken Post and John Burrell to give us a lot more information on their budgets by budget line, how they're doing it. We broke it down into the town format so that we could look at it. We also went back a couple of years and looked at that year over year over year, what the changes were, what we thought the changes were. We sent that back to the schools with a number of questions, a lot of questions on, we don't understand this line, can you explain why this is this way? Can you explain why this line has a budget but hasn't had any spend in the last 2 years? We think you might be able to look at this, if you look at it from this light. We're not telling them what to spend money on, but we are telling them, we want to know more about this to understand your budget more fully. We haven't gotten those answers yet, so the Board of Selectmen today decided to leave the budget recommendation for the schools at 5%. I will tell you it was not unanimous. It was 2 yes and 1 no. Harry had some concerns in that, and I'm not going to try to paraphrase you, but he did not believe that the budget was allocated properly within the departments and what they're doing with the schools. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that there's real, one of my issues is a program which over the next 10 years, we're gonna spend $3 million funding. And it is not working. The program is not working. If this were a music program, or if it was an athletic program, or an after activities, it would be gone. And and it is the K through 6 world language program. Now, I was on the Board of Education. I was the chairman of the CAPE committee, and when we initiated putting world language K through 6 to get it to where we're K through 12. So I do not take this lightly, but the program that we're teaching now is not the program that we had anticipated back when we put this in. It is clear that the students who are coming through K through 6 are basically on the same level as a student moving in who's never had it going into 7th grade. The program just is not working. The children like it, but if you get into it, it's an introductory. It's not an immersive. It's an introductory program. And to me, to spend $3 million over the next 10 years on a program that is marginal is I think it's wasteful. And so I'm not saying that they don't need this amount of money, but I'm thinking that they have a lot of this money in their budget if they reallocate some of it.
Thank you, Harry. So we believe after examining their budget for teacher turnover is $80,000, right? I think. Typically, it's been much, much higher than that to save, averaging about $300,000 per year over the last 5 years. We think they could up that amount. That's what. These are just suggestions. Again, we can't tell them what to do. Employee benefits have changed pretty significantly. They are going to have a save of about $200,000 on health insurance, because the original estimate we got from our provider was much higher than what it's actually going to come in at. So that would be a big save. And we believe that they can refine some of their budget lines to more accurately reflect the budget that reflects what they've actually spent over the past years, prior years. And I think that's a reasonable ask. And so when we get their questions back, the answers, we'll certainly share that with you immediately, because this budget is going to you guys now. Yes.
Does that include, the numbers you're thinking include the reduction in the WPCA costs that they hadn't seemed to have picked up?
Yeah, that's one of the things where they could lower the cost, right. Audit is another. They put $5,000 in for an additional expense for audit. It's not changing next year. So, you had 5,000 here, 6,000 there, 8,000 there.
Yep. So you went through all those little...
Yes.
You guys went through those all.
We're pretty comfortable that the number that we cut, 817,000, can be met without affecting any student-related activity at all. It's not going to be easy. It's always harder, but I think you have to do the bottom-up approach on these budgets so that everyone is comfortable. My goal would be for Harry, Sue, and I to have unanimity on what the budget should be and send it to you with 3 yeses. And my goal would be that you have a budget that all 6 of you can do exactly the same thing. And then it's much more likely that it'll be passed by the voters. If the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance all say, yes, this is the right budget, as we did with the school project, that helped a lot, I think, that people said, you know what, they really looked at this. I'm going to trust them that they've done their homework, and we showed them the details.
So the review,
You want to say
Just to
something?
clarify your question, so we went through and asked them questions and looked at things that looked different. We did not redo their budget.
No.
We're waiting for
understand
the
that.
answers, and we were hoping to have them before this, so that we know certain lines, WPCA, we know that they've gone now to the WPCA to find out what their actual fees are gonna be. So some of the things that we called to their attention, we do know about, but we did not redo their budget. And one,
Understand.
we simply didn't have time, and 2, we don't have the answers to know what they were thinking.
Or the authority really to redo their budget.
Correct, but I just want to make it clear that we didn't go through every line, that
No.
didn't want that to be misunderstood.
Yes.
The level of review that you did on the school budget is greater than it's been in the past, as the town side or the Board of Selectmen gone through at this level of detail in the past?
No, we have not. We have not. We've been using the documentation provided by the Board of Ed for their budget and they're doing all the questions, just like you guys do. Have any questions? Is this the right number? Is this where we should be? I'll be honest with you, I don't think I was ever totally comfortable with the numbers that we decided on
Okay.
because we didn't have all that supporting documentation to say, this is the right number.
Is it your understanding that the Board of Ed has provided that level of detail oversight in the past and that's changed, or?
I don't think so, but I think that's a good question for the Board of Ed.
Mhm.
I did not attend their finance meetings, and I did not watch all of their, board meetings as to what level they went to. I think it would behoove them to do the kind of, that deep dive. That would be my preference. That's the way I would do it.
I did go to their finance committee meetings, and we didn't do, and I thought, did I miss one? I did go back to the minutes, and I didn't. I missed one when we talked about budgets. And there's talk about how to present it, there's talk about things, but at the finance committee meetings, we had the same 11 pages that are in the budget book as far as the details.
So when you were doing your work with them, I know that the questions have gone back to the Board of Ed, but the work in going through the numbers and presenting the forms and things, has there been any Board of Ed presence at those meetings, or has it been entirely employees, Ken?
No, what we did is we took all the information. They were really good about giving us all the information we requested.
It was a
We
lot of
went
work.
through it,
Yeah.
we analyzed it, took us about 2.5 weeks, and then we sent it back to them, asking all the questions that we had. We haven't gotten a response yet.
Okay.
We sent it also to all the board members, so they had it too, and they could ask those questions and go through it. And I don't know if they've done that with their staff, but I would hope.
What are those
they
areas
would.
of additional concern that you haven't received any answers on?
We haven't gotten, some things like in health insurance, we know we got better numbers, so we know what that is. The audit, we
Just no
know that.
clarity yet behind it.
WPCA, we know that, because these are hard facts. We know what's being done. But there are other areas where we've asked questions where we don't quite understand where they got to that budget number, as to why do you got there? Can you give us a little more explanation? Is there an outlier we don't know about that's causing this to go up 20,000?
What, both with the school budget and with the fire budget, that it appears that we've never gone through and looked at, here's the actual spend and here's the budget, and why is the actual different from the budget? So that was a lot of our questions on the Board of Ed, that, every, for both of them, every year you've spent 5,000, and here you want 25,000. And I don't know if you got a copy of those things, but we can give it to you, that essentially we laid it out, actual, 20 budget, 21 budget, and then we subtracted out the outliers, so that what's left should be the status quo. And on that status quo, over 2 years, comparing 19 actual to 21 budget, why did it increase 20%? Because maybe it should have been put into, maybe there's something missing from the investments as they call it, because that status quo you would think would be the equivalent of 2 years cost of living or something
Right.
like that.
Marcia, but that, you're talking about the Board of Ed side,
Yes.
Yes.
but that only works if they input the data correctly.
That's correct. We did notice that when we were looking at the details, that there are some things that, for example, that they budgeted for nurses' licenses and there's 0 in the actual. And why is that? And you can drill down and you can see under dues and fees, they've got nurses' license. So
I understand that, but it's the importance, you'd have to get buy-in from them that they're gonna input the things into the right categories, especially Munis, it should be easier.
Especially so you can compare year to year.
Right. My second question, Dan, I believe you asked the Board of Ed if they thought it was their responsibility to review the line items. And my understanding of their answer, and maybe I'm wrong, and I want input from everybody, did I hear right that the Board of Ed members said, that's not their responsibility. They're not vetting the numbers that the administration puts forward. That is not what they're tasked with doing.
I
Did I
heard,
hear that
I
wrong?
heard two different responses to that. When asked first, the answer was, we do vet, and you'd be impressed with the questions we asked, and we do dig. And then later on in the meeting, the answer was, we do district level oversight, but not principal and school level. So I agree with you that the conclusion was, they do not.
But-
So we would, as a town, and I think the Board of Selectmen agree with me, we would like to see the Board of Ed do a process much more similar to what we do on the town side. Really have the Board of Ed dive down, start at the bottom. Okay, here's the department, here's your postage, here's your salaries, here's your benefits, here's your travel, here's your dues, all of those things, just, and then build it up to the high level. That would be our preference.
At the very least, meet with the principals.
Yeah, on a school
The
level,
fact that
at
the,
least.
that the
Yeah.
Board of Ed, I mean, all right, tell them
Yeah.
on next week, but that they don't meet the principals doesn't make sense.
Right.
Mark, let me speak from experience. When I first came on the Board of Education, we did go line by line. That's why some of our meetings would go from 7 o'clock till 1:30 in the morning, but we did go line by line. It weaned off of that about, probably, I would say, around 2010, around in there, 2008. That's when it started to wean off of that. And it became more of the administration giving the Board of Education a budget, or giving them, and sometimes what they would do is they would give us 3 options. This is if we have everything. This is the first cut. This is the second cut. And then the board would go through those, but it's not a line by line. And what, now being on both sides of the table, I can see where it is very difficult for a Board of Education to do this budget. Now that I'm on this side, I'm shocked at how much they have done, because they have so much else that they're doing. And as the board, you know, to drill down like Marcia and Steve and you know, some of you are doing, and Marcia's team, I just don't think it's there. I don't think that, maybe I'm wrong, but I think I would like to see part of the budget come over to where the town has kind of jurisdiction over, not telling them how to spend the money, but
Right.
telling them what's there.
I actually appreciate your opinion, but I'm gonna be bluntly honest, we're paying a position $170,000 a year to manage the funds.
Yeah.
$170,000 a year employee should be able to manage a budget.
Okay.
And that's my opinion, to get the numbers proper. We shouldn't be chasing the WPCA in March of a budget season. We shouldn't be chasing the audit numbers in March of a budget season. We shouldn't be chasing down the validity of numbers in March before it comes to you, waiting to the last day for the Board of Selectmen to get numbers. The budget comes every year. We know when it's coming. We have dates set to start in December. Steve starts in November, and we have these dates. And I understand what you're saying, but we are paying someone the money to fulfill that position. And there should be expectations that these numbers are correct when they come to us. You, Steve, yourself shouldn't be going through numbers saying, well, gee, the WPCA went down in percentage, we should be doing it. Or the audit has been 25,000 for 2 years and we're just gonna put 30,000 in because it sounds good. By the time they come to you, to me, it should be a, look at the numbers, do they make sense, and we move forward. Which should almost be, you know, you hate the word rubber stamp, but it should almost be a rubber stamp. And when there's areas where you spend 5,000, from the town side and Steve, we get an explanation. A big explanation of why. Whether we agree with it or not, we at least get the explanation of why it jumped. For Marcia to go through and say 5,000 to 20,000 without an explanation, to me is wrong. I'll be really, again, honest, is the health insurance. We put in 9.5% as a bookmark, which you all agreed, so I'm not saying that was bad, but it's now like 6.5. Why can't we get that number? That's a $300,000 number. Marcia, how many days have you asked the Board of Ed for that number?
I asked them for the updated number. The 9.5 was what we were told by the.
Correct, and I agree, I didn't
So,
say that was wrong.
Which is 7.5 plus a 2%, 2-year increase. So we talked last week, and I followed up yesterday, just to get the details of how that was calculated.
This is a huge number that could be a change in the whole budget process that would help the Board of Selectmen make a decision today much easier. And to me, that's an hour to 2 hour exercise.
And to that point, this is kind of what I'm saying, is the reason why we're not getting this they just don't want to do the work? Is it they're not qualified to do it? Or is it that they're doing so much else that they're not doing it?
But
That's
we're
what I
paying the
was.
positions to do
Right,
the
there
work.
are
I understand that, and
accountable
I'm not defending the
Sorry,
Board
you
of
can
Ed.
speak,
My
Dan.
question
I
is,
apologize.
why aren't we getting these? Is it because basically the position isn't competent of doing it? Is that they're doing too much else? Why aren't we getting it?
That's a great question, that's a good question. Because to me, to be really honest, I talk with Marcia, something like the health insurance should be a workbook. It should be an Excel workbook where you change a percentage, you should be able to plug in the percentage and get the number to spit it out. It should be a workbook. In other words, how did you get to the number to begin with? What process did you use to come up with 5.7 million on the top side and the 1.6 million of the employee contributions? There had to be calculations. So there had to be a workbook. So when we say we go from 9.5 to 6.5, this number should be readily available.
You know,
And
that's
to-
why the town, you know, I do my budget, and you'll see, you have it in front of you. You'll see the first selectmen's budget, then you'll see the Board of Selectmen's budget, then you'll see your own budget with all the changes, plus a list of why those changes were made. And
And again, this is partly why I did not vote yes, is because it's not just the K through 6. It's that I'm just not confident in what we're getting. And I don't want to blame them. I don't want to say they're hiding anything. It's just, I don't have what I need to see, and therefore, I'm not going to vote. That's why, that's mostly why I voted.
Steve, I don't know, don't know if you have this on your list of questions, but I haven't written it down yet, but could you add to your list of questions to provide line item by line item, any line item that is simply last year plus, as opposed to a bottoms up? Anything that, any budget item, regardless of how large or how small, that is simply, this is what we did last year.
yeah,
we're
we'll
gonna
send,
do a plus.
we'll send that question.
Thank you.
And I can't think of any.
Okay.
Okay. I think a lot of these questions would be probably better directed when.
Agreed.
I agree.
Agreed.
I
Agreed. I don't
just
want to harp
think
on
we'll
it,
move
right,
on.
but it's compared to the budget.
So if we move on, I explained this, if we can move on to the next slide. So with capital projects, we are really trying to follow the financial plan. And our goal is to pay for virtually every single capital item with cash, unless it's a huge project. You know, I would say 500,000 and above. So that means we'll
That
probably.
says 5 million above.
No, that's just, our overall goal is to have the total spending 5 million
Oh.
in cash. We have been in the past, and you guys are well aware of this for the most part, that underspending on capital, and when it ends up coming and biting us, you know where, when we have to completely tear down a building because we didn't maintain it. Or we have to spend so much more money to repair something if we just maintained it. So where our goal is over the next few years is to get up to spending $5 million a year in cash and eliminating borrowing on a year-to-year basis, unless it's something major. You know, a $2 million project, $1 million project. And we can have those discussions. This year, every single item except for a couple, it had to be 100,000 or more for us to borrow for it, or we paid cash. And I want to continue to move that up every single year, to pay cash. And so this year, we're seeing a significant increase in what we're spending of $2,214,000, up from $1.8 million last year, and up from $1.3 million the year before. And we should state this, while still maintaining reasonable tax increases, right? So we're shifting from borrowing to cash, but the borrowing, you don't really see that until you borrow. It goes out 20 years and you divide it by 20, so it's kind of deceiving. It's easier to borrow because you don't see an immediate impact to the budget, but you do see it collectively as you move along. And we do not want to be hogtied for other big projects that we might want to do in the future.
This goes along with you, Dan, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, this is completely in line with what we've been talking about for the last couple of years. When we get to the capital day, I have some specific questions, but very, very happy with how that laid out, very happy.
And so, and our borrowing is down 646,000 over last year. And it is in line with the financial plan, within 2%, 3% of our plan that we decided on last year. Now, after our budget season is over, we are going to be updating that plan again with the new information we've got. We know some new developments coming in, other things are changing, so we're going to update that and add another year so that we have a much better picture. So as we get to each year, it gets closer and closer, so there's no surprises. Here's a list of the largest capital projects. No surprise with the paving, we do that every year. We moved it up again, 100,000 in cash. So in 2.5 years,
I gotta say, I'm so glad to see that you guys continue doing that.
Yep.
yeah.
It is-
Have you seen what Ridgefield just did? They're going back to borrowing.
Are they?
Yep. They're going back, I think that's a mistake. We worked so hard over the last, not even when I was here, the last 10, 12 years, to get this where it should be, maintain the roads and pay cash. We should absolutely pay cash and just
But
move
you
it up.
continued it, Steve. Take
Continue.
some credit. You
That's
stayed
what I'm
tough
saying.
and you
Right.
continued it, so take some credit. You continued it.
Yeah. I didn't start it, but I'm a strong believer in it. Now that the library, the new library is not on our books, we have been deferring maintenance at the library. And if you go over there and look at those windows, some of them are dangerous. They are actually rotting out. I think it is time to redo the windows at the library. If we do the library windows, that will include the front entrance where we have some ADA compliance issues, where the doors are not coordinated enough and they're too close together. So if somebody comes through a door in a wheelchair and the next door hits them, or the one, it's a mess. And if you go over there, Yvonne Check could show you exactly what the problem is.
Problem with children going into.
We need to replace some equipment. I'm also a big believer in putting money away for the reserves for the fire department. We have $100,000 in each department's reserve for new equipment. And for the Still River Greenway, you know, we got the grant for $207,000. That did include design, and when we went out, we did 3 different designs. The Board of Selectmen looked at it very, very carefully. The cost is going to finish the project will be $183,000 more than the $207,000 in grants. We went back, they won't give us any more grants. So if we do this project, the grant will pay for more than half of the project.
I'm happy that's in the budget, not.
That's in the
one-off,
budget.
And we can discuss it when
Yep.
discuss that.
Yep. We did, on the education side, the boys' locker room, they told us to be 1-2, 1-3. We did put the $605,000 in that they requested, that's half the money. So I would say we would wait, reserve it. Don't do it till we get a full design, and then make a decision as to what we want to do. Because 1.2 seems just like a crazy number to me for a bathroom.
I gotta speak on that one, and there was a few other people, if they wanna speak up, that joined us. We were basically challenged to go in there in the locker room, and we got about halfway in, and question was asked, where's the bad part? I'm not sure how you spend $605,000 on a bathroom that needs some paint and some ceiling tiles.
My understanding is that the showers actually don't work.
Showers do
This might
not
have to
work.
be replaced.
We can replace some showers, that's not $605,000. So I'd really be like to see some detail of what they are trying to get. for
Well,
$605,000.
we'll ask the board that they've done some preliminary work, but I know when we had the emergency, the storm last year, we were running electrical cords into the girls' bathroom because the boys' showers did not work. And let me tell you, those showers were disgusting.
I understand
I used
showers
them
don't
once
work,
myself.
So we fix them.
Yeah.
That
You're
is
not sure it'll cost
$605,000.
$605,000. So let's understand what it
Or
is. I think
twice
this
that
is.
is what the new SUV.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there is renovation to say, it doesn't need to be rebuilt. It's not like you have to redo the entire place inside, which
I just, when I got the walkthrough, and to me, it was pretty clear they want to expand the weight area. There was a perfect area to do it through a set of double doors, yet they want to knock down a load-bearing wall in order to capture the same square footage, maybe even a little less. I'm just not sure
I
that.
agree with you.
But are we truly being fair to the Board of Ed on this one? Because do they truly understand what they want to do, or are they just putting an estimate out there
I don't know.
and going through it?
I think it's
mean,
an estimate at this point, and I think we have to go through, and if we wanted to, we're gonna have to get a designer, a design firm,
That's all I'm
to come
trying to
in,
say is-
tell them what our needs are, what we want, and the design firm always gives us a preliminary estimate of what they think it would cost.
Because it might come in more in line with what you're thinking, Mark,
Might.
is what I'm trying to say, if we had it done properly.
Or
So
at
we
least
have
get a
a-
couple of options of redesign
Well,
and
so-
fix.
All right. So yeah, that's the thing. So everybody's saying that the locker room is in shambles and disgusting and doesn't work, which is different than saying, if we're gonna do it, let's also do all this other stuff, so it's
I have
different
some
scopes.
pictures.
Right, yep.
Maybe mine and
So-
and Sue's
Right.
interpretation of shambles is different than everyone else's,
Yeah.
but if we agree, we're probably not far off.
Fair enough.
So let's have a more detailed
Fair
conversation when the Board of Ed comes in. I think that's a good idea. Since we're keeping Wisconsin, I think we should start doing the maintenance on that. They had 2 requests, both for the same amount of money, because they originally just had one project. They were gonna do both. It was the plumbing, I believe, and the electric. So we wanna start to maintain Wisconsin. The baseball, softball field outfield drainage. This morning, I met with Iroquois Gas. They came in and made a presentation to the DST, the Development Services team. That's the team that works with developers. And we have informal conversations. Okay, this is a project I want to do. Zoning feeds in, inland wetlands feeds in, the fire marshal feeds in, and just gives them informal advice. You know what? I don't think you can do that because this part's wetlands. So they're not spending a lot of money on a design that we're going to turn down. So Iroquois came in today. They gave us a very good presentation on what they're doing, how they're doing it, when they're doing it. They're still on target. They're looking to get approval from FERC by December 31st for the project, and they want to build in 2023. I had a meeting with the management after the DST meeting, and I asked them if they would be willing to do 2 things for us. 3 things. 1, give us an easement on their property that abuts Wisconsin for about an acre, perhaps, so that we could put in a 90-foot diamond and a small diamond. I asked them to pay for that field, and I also asked them to pay for the drainage at the high school and explain the problem with one 90-foot field we have. We're losing the 90 at Huckleberry, and they said that they would take that to their management and come back to us. It's a big ask, but you
I
know
gotta
what?
give you credit for asking it, Steve. I wouldn't have come up with that idea, so that was very forward thinking.
Thank you.
If
thank
anything
you.
comes of that, that
And
was.
now is the time to ask them, because they're doing a massive project in Brookfield, and they absolutely want to stay on the good side of town. And they have a foundation that does this sort of thing. It's good PR for them. I think it would help ease the way with some residents that they're investing in our town, not just in their own equipment, but investing in our town. So we'll see where that goes.
It's not an outrageous ask, it's a good ask.
Yeah. Well,
It's a
thank
good
you.
ask.
Thank you.
This is a little tangential to that, but
Yeah.
are they considering, like, the parking for the existing 2 ball fields is pretty much non-existent for Wisconsin?
We would have to do that, but that's also part of the school's overall plan to do parking. Remember, we're gonna be pulling the portables out, so we would have to look at that as a total plan. Because the smaller field right now, we're envisioning would start somewhere where the portables are. Because we'll put the big field in the back, but we don't want a kid hitting a ball 350 feet and taking out a 6-year-old in the little field. It just goes down. So we want a big separation there, and that's why we want to push back and get an easement into their property, so we can move that whole field back a little bit. On the Brookfield High School exterior windows and doors, this is 1/2 of the money they requested. I think this is a project that they can easily do half their windows. It's a huge expense. I think it's important to secure that building and make it as secure as possible. So we put in half of the cost of that, because we can't do every single project 100% every single year. And also Brookfield High School plumbing fixtures and equipment, I think that's what they need. Those are the big projects. But as we get to meet with them, I think you can ask more questions.
All right, before you go, whoa, go back. Before we go, don't get ahead of me here. Since this year, we had extra revenue in the building fees, and we had extra revenue in the investments. I know you have a goal of getting the general fund up, so I'm not gonna take away from your goal. But is there any money we can throw at this year that we have surplus in some of these projects and cut the budget down for next year? Because we should have a surplus, I believe on the investment side, we had a pretty good surplus.
We're
You-
down on land use fees. It's not near budget.
Okay, but I mean, I think there was a couple areas, and I don't know which areas, so I'm just paraphrasing here. But I mean, do we have 300,000, 400,000 that maybe we could take the library windows and take them out this year and reduce our tax for next year. I know you have a goal for general fund, so I'm not trying to.
No, only within this year's budget, and I agree with you. So let us go back, look at it, make an extrapolation of where we know where we think we're gonna end the year up, you're gonna get that information, we did it with it.
Right.
But let's look at it a little more carefully to see if there's
Well,
any room.
Or fill the reserves
It all
or do
depends
something.
on special ed.
Mhm.
That if we have special ed costs, we have no extra.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it depends how we decide to pay for special ed.
Correct.
So, before I answer that, let us do it.
I wasn't asking you to
No,
answer it, I
that's
was
fine.
throwing it out
It's a good
there as,
question.
if we can use some extra money, like I say, I know you have a goal for the general
Right.
fund, so don't think I'm taking away from the general fund.
No.
But if we had a goal of getting 200,000 to the general fund, and we got 200,000 extra,
I'd be
let's
fine.
let's
I'd be
take
fine.
one of these
Yeah,
numbers off the
that's
board.
fine.
Last year, we looked at even just money that was allocated for capital that wasn't fully spent. If there's
Right.
anything left over, just for those,
Right,
specifically
let's-
for those
Yeah,
departments.
we'll look at that too. We'll look at that too. To see projects that came in under budget. I know like the roof at the fire department
But we've
came
already
in
spent-
significantly under budget, but we did use a lot of those funds already.
I'm not trying to manage it, I'm just trying to say, look, that's all.
Right.
Okay.
Can I
We'll do
ask a
that.
quick question though?
Sure.
The Brookfield High School turf field, what's driving the adjustment? Is it because it's being put in reserve? It looks like we're still gonna bond for it, but it's like half of what the
I'm
original
sorry,
ask
which
was.
item?
The turf replacement at Brookfield High.
That's half the price of doing it. That's half the price, so it would reserve.
So okay.
That's what it says in the capital budget.
That's
So we
half
would
the
do it
replacement cost.
next year.
Oh, that's,
We
Yeah.
reserve
No,
this year.
it's just confusing that
Next year.
It's
Right.
So you're, okay, so you're
it's
gonna
not-
bond for it for half
It's
and
not in the
bond.
cash, it's not in the reserve budget, just the timing of how these projects have gone, that, we don't have to actually take the cash out, that, we've always, from what I can see, said, oh, 3 million of projects, 3 million of bond anticipation notes, and maybe what we do is say, well, this one is 250,000, we only take out 2,750,000,
Right.
and then take it all out
Right.
next year.
Does that make sense, given that rates are kind of at historic lows though? Like, would it make sense to just, we're gonna pay them all off in chunks, there's just a
It's
year.
a very good question. Our goal was, and we have the discipline of staying within the financial plan, and that pushes us out of it. So how do
The
we get
bans are
there?
short term anyway, they're gonna be rolled into a long term thing, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, so
Yeah.
it's not that.
And in
This is
talking
what
to
this is
Mary,
financing.
we,
But you-
all these fields are gonna have to be replaced. The worst is the backfield at the high school, and next year is probably where we're really gonna have to bite the bullet. So if we put half the money this year, it's not as big a hit next year, and we can fit it within the plan.
And with respect to that 10-year, 20-year, that's the ultimate goal, that we would do a ban altogether, and we're waiting for whatever the owner's project manager is working up a cash flow, so we can look at where are we going to be on cash on that
In the school.
school project, and then we can do those together, we can decide, do we do a little bit at a time, and just, it's gonna be a big project to
You
figure
know,
out.
with
when to
historically
ban.
low rates, we should seriously consider borrowing for the school in the next year. More than just what we need over the next 3 years, right? Lock in a low rate. We do pay some interest on it. We have to do that analysis, and our bond counsel and our financial advisor will definitely help us with that. But we need to know the cash flow from Arcadis, so we know when we need the money to pay everybody.
If we do that, can Ricky or Dan sit in those meetings
Yeah.
and be on the front end of this?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
Eileen?
If you're not
Or
gonna
somebody
spend,
with some, not, I know you're,
You
I'm
have-
being, sorry, I'm not belittling, I'm not belittling. I'm talking the financial people, it's above my head, but if you're doing it, Eileen, Dan, or Ricky to be on the front end,
That's easy to manage.
right? We'd like to be a part of that on the
Sure.
front end. What,
Absolutely.
we'd elect someone in our group.
The final decision, though, just so you know, by charter, is up to John and I. But
I'm
I'm
not worried about the
certainly
final decision.
willing to have
Just take
anybody who
advice.
wants to, and you guys have a lot of experience, I'm more than willing to take that experience and incorporate it in the discussions with our.
I'm talking about experienced people,
Yeah.
not me, that I'm
Yeah.
not experienced. I'm
No,
talking
no,
about someone
I'm
that
fine.
has, oh, you're not either?
I'm fine with that.
I'm pharmaceutical.
Oh, well, then it'd be the two over here on the left that have
Yeah.
experience with this.
She has experience with finance in a different way.
That's all.
If we can get us the masks.
And I would anticipate when we do that, Matt that came here, or Sperndale or whatever his last name is, that he would also come make a full presentation to everyone as well.
Yeah.
And this is no problem, I wrote it down so we don't forget.
I think though, for us to understand, if Dan or Ricky understands it, it helps us understand it.
I'm
Yeah.
That's
absolutely
all.
for that. I'm absolutely for that.
It wouldn't be a deterrent, it would be to help
Yeah.
communicate.
John and I,
that's all.
and I think I'm speaking for John, absolutely welcome that. You guys are really smart. You've done this kind of work. Dan, this is your business. You could probably bring even more knowledge to it than I have. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
Sorry, Dan.
Oh, no,
We're okay with it too.
We're
that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and if you want to sit too, you're more than welcome. I'm sorry.
Here we go.
Harry was we put in charge of
not at all.
determining the discounted cash flow of the next presentation.
I'm out.
Okay. On contingency, this is a subject I don't want to get into a lot of detail unless you go into executive session. It has to do with contractual issues for the most part, and if you want to go into executive session, we can do that.
Not tonight, but
You don't have to do it tonight.
I'll give my opinion on this right now, so it's clear for me. This is only me, is I think your budget's strong. I think your budget is, if we go through it a little bit more, I think you earn the right to have some in the contingency to manage your business. I know we have to go through the numbers, but I think, responsible budgets create manageable processes. That's all. That's my opinion.
So I would have one suggestion, rather than starting to go through the entire budget, we can do whatever you want. I think we'd have a more fruitful discussion after you've met with each of the departments to start to get into the detail of the expenditures. That would be my suggestion.
I think we have a few up front to
Yeah,
get
that's
started
fine.
with, not too
Okay.
crazy. I think Mark had a handful, Dan probably had a
I
couple.
just have one high level before you get into the detail, and that's,
Yeah, go ahead. We have one more page on the
Oh, we
debt
have a few
service.
more pages.
Oh, we do. I didn't have them on my, okay, let's go through the next pages.
Sorry, we're not finished.
And just on that contingency, when we compare it to the model, we moved the contingency up into the town operations so that it's comparative, that the model, because eventually, if it's spent, it'll be in town operations. We also added, we tie out exactly to the budget, we added 35,000 because we're getting a little bit of savings this year because of accrued payroll. I know we went through accrued payroll last year, and so I heard about why we have leap year on the news this morning, and I thought, oh, that's it. Accrued payroll is like leap year, that it doesn't divide out evenly. So last year there were 2 days accrued, this year there's one. So we have, even if people got 2.5% increases, it looks like 1.38, I've already got the calls, but that's the accrual adjustment. But in your tab, behind the colored tab in your book, it shows how much all of that is, and it shows a little schedule of how many accrued each day. But I just wanted to say that contingency is up there. When we had the earlier slide comparing it to the model, it's in town operations as the spend.
Yeah. So with the new school debt, we don't anticipate the issue in advance until we have way more detail. But we refinanced some of our borrowings last year. We had some immediate savings of $54,000 in 2020, $17,000 in this year, and then continued savings over the life of the bond for about $20,000 per year. It should also be noted that we went out to bid last year for bond counsel and for financial advisor, and we saved approximately $75,000 on the fees that were charged to us to do that borrowing. So going out for bid on that, we got two excellent companies. They've done a fantastic job. You've met them. I mean, they're really, really good, so we're very happy with that. If you want to talk about revenues, you don't see a big change here in our revenue. We collect virtually all of the taxes we're due. This last year and a half, we made a big push on overdue taxes by sending out the marshal to go after those largest people who owe us a lot of money. That's been very, very successful. We've shown you the reports on what we've done there. We don't anticipate we'll get another big bunch like that, but we will stay on top of it. If we see somebody flowing into a high amount of taxes they owe us, We're gonna go after them sooner rather than later. And
If
this
I-
just breaks out, yeah, go ahead.
If I could just talk about this graph, it is pretty boring. If we just look at the bars, that's how much is in each of the categories as far as residential, commercial, and so forth. The exciting part of this graph is that line that, and that goes to the axis on the right, and that is the percent increase. So you can see, let me see if I can get my cursor. Right here, we have a 0.98% increase. Last year it was a 0.4. Our model shows it as a 0.96% increase, because that was the average excluding this reval year. So that would be the exciting part of this graph,
Now, we're gonna see this
in
change.
case you didn't recognize it.
With the development that's going on in town, Brookfield Village today sent me their final design. They are going to be breaking ground this spring. The supermarket has been to inland wetlands, and they have asked, they told us they hadn't been to you yet? Okay, so I apologize. So that's who they're starting. They've come to us, we're going to do a tax abatement with them so that they give us the parking lot. We think that's a win for us. We do have a couple of other projects that are coming online, including Iroquois. And Iroquois was not anticipated in our financial plan at all. And Iroquois will bring, they're telling us, a $90 to $100 million investment. That will bring about in today's mill rate, about $2.1 million in new taxes.
Do we know how that compares to Milford? Because Milford is also getting the expansion, and I think, my understanding is that we could be able to achieve more revenue from that project if we spent money on, there's an energy assessor that's specific to those types of plants. My neighbor's an assessor.
I don't know anything about that. Can you send me the information?
Yeah.
I'm just talking about our normal taxes,
Right.
personal property
Come up
tax.
with more.
Yeah, no, my neighbor is an assessor in a different town, and he said
Yeah, that'd be
there's a
interesting if you
specific
had that
energy
guy that came
assessment. No. No, other side. And I think I maybe messaged you a while back about it, but I'll get a name and contact, but apparently Iroquois doesn't argue with the numbers that this guy comes up with because he's like the expert in the country on it.
Hey.
And we thought that what we're getting compared to Milford is way less, and our facility is bigger now and is expected to be expanded
Yeah.
more.
You
So
know,
I don't want to bring that in
no,
before the.
No, that's fine, because that's gonna be built in 2023, so we have a little bit of time. They're telling us 90 to 100 million, if that's absolutely correct, that's a huge amount of tax revenue. And we've always kind of had the implicit agreement that any new development, the taxes from that, we're gonna push into capital till we get to where we want. So it doesn't really hurt the residents, it just builds up the capital investment in cash. So that would be a big plus, because we estimate the school to be somewhere between 4 to 5 million a year. That's almost half, that one project, if it comes to fruition. And that's not in the financial plan. So that's one of the things, when we redo the financial plan, we're gonna put in all those estimates. And they look right now very positive.
Is
Very
there,
positive.
is there any abatement or layering in of that, that would be day one once?
You're gonna come in, put all these compressors in our town. You have no choice but to do it.
Yep.
You cannot move somewhere else. You can't take
Yep.
your compressor and go to Danbury.
Yep.
So, we're not biting anyone else for this. They only have 7 compressors on their line, and we have one of them. Now, we're getting a lot of pushback. I don't know if you watched the Board of Selectmen meeting last night. There are a lot of people who are very concerned about it. The net issue on this is that Iroquois has been, I think, very open and upfront. They had like 12 people here. Sue was I couldn't make it, but Sue was we had a meeting here that was pushed out to the town. Come visit with Iroquois. They'll tell you what they're doing, how they're doing it. I am personally very impressed with what they've done and how they're doing it. I've been to their facility and walked around it. I was standing outside their building, 15 feet away from their building, and it was running full bore. And I could still have a normal conversation like this, 15 feet outside the building. There are people who are complaining about a barometric bomb. I don't quite understand what they mean by that. They do off gas. If they have an emergency, they have to shut the compressor down. They do have to off gas the gas that's inside the building. When they're building the new plant, they're gonna capture all of that and re-enter it downline. They're putting more acoustical sound deadening in the existing buildings as well as the new building. They're putting in scrubbers in their towers, catalytic converters in effect, to take more of the greenhouse gases out. So it sounds like they're being very, very, very careful about being environmentally sensitive. They have bought the 2 houses across the street. Those people made out very well, I think, and they were happy to sell their houses. So this is something we have to, and people are allowed to be concerned, you know. We got the double whammy last night of the 5G people who are very upset 5G installations will be coming to Brookfield, and they feel that people are going to be microwaved and irradiated and that they're harmful to you physically. These people are very genuine and they really believe this. I have personally not seen scientific evidence from a competent source that I say, okay, they looked at this whole thing, both sides, right? So we'll continue to deal with that as we go forward.
Do you want me to explain
Yeah,
next
so
slide?
let's talk about a little tax
This looks
collection.
exciting.
So the reason for these 2 slides broken out separate is really our revenue driver are the taxes. That what did the mill rate go up? What % are we collecting? Our policy has been to do the 5-year average collection rate, which would be 99.7. That is lower than the current year, which was 99.34%, even though it's higher than the graph. So the graph, the blue bars are showing the percent collected. So if we send out $1 million of tax bills and we collect 99% of them, 99% of that $1 million, it would be at 99% here. That so never hit 100%. You have to see the access starts at 98%, just so you can see some differences, because if we start at 0, it would be a pretty boring graph again. So we're using 99.7. The tax collector was worried about our collections. We went through her collections through February on Monday with her, and pointed out that she was worried about not collecting at the 99.34%, and it looks like she's right on track to do that. She was worried about not collecting all the back taxes because she had collected so much last year after we did the budget that she's never collected that much. Looks like she's on track to do that. And then it says cash basis down there because while I was doing this, I was also doing the graphs of the percent collected. This is on a cash basis using her GRBBR. When you get the graphs next week on your Board of Finance report, it's on an accrual basis. So there's some small differences there that the percentages don't line up. But this is how we've always done it, using the 99%.
Do you see any risk there with going with the 99.07 when 3 years historically where it was a little lower?
We're collecting at a good rate. There's always risk, but I don't think so. I think
So is that increased rate this year because you guys are going after?
She is going after, correct, that
Yeah.
she did get a big deposit last week, like a $50,000, because she sent out notices that she was going to do tax sales again. And so she has been more assertive on that, so that should be helpful.
So, remind me, I'm sorry, I forget, in the budget book, it's at 100% or is it the 99.7 for the tax revenue line? Is it
So
net, or do we have
we
like a
assume-
receivable line that then goes forward in the future?
Pardon me?
Is it, do you use the 100% or the 99% for the current year budget?
99%, that we use the 5-year average. We never assume that we're going to collect
So,
100%.
Fair enough, that's what I thought was true.
We'll take other revenue.
Yeah, on revenue, we look at this and we do averages and talk to each department on what they think their fees are gonna be. We discussed earlier, land use fees this year are not gonna be as high as we had estimated. So we went back and looked at it and sat down with land use. I had originally in my budget $400,000 in fees, because that's been pretty close to what we've gotten in the past. Marcia said, Steve, I don't think that's right. She put in $350,000. Is that right?
I
No,
think
we-
300.
I'm
We
sorry, Marcia put in
compromised.
300. We thought, okay, we need to have this discussion. We sat down with Alice Dew, for about half an hour and looked at what our historical average is and what other one-time projects we think are gonna be coming in next year in next year's fiscal year. And we decided to, I think we could have made an argument to stay at the 400,000, but to be conservative, we decided to put it at 350, so we're comfortable with that number. We're doing the same thing for charges for services, averages and the grossing up. You'll see in the budget where the senior trips, we used to net them. So they take the seniors on a trip to, I don't know, Radio City Music Hall. What they were doing is they would just give a net number. We had, this is a win, we made $24 on this trip, or we lost $54. Now we're putting in all the revenue from the trips and all the expenses with a net number separate. So you're gonna see that as a difference in your budget. And investment income is the current year-to-date plus the balance of prior year actual earnings, and we're pretty comfortable with what that number's gonna be, and it's conservative, I think, in this interest rate environment.
Are you guys using 2% as your assumed rate of return? Is that
What we
you see?
did was, because it keeps changing, the balance will decrease, we used what
Throughout the year, you mean?
Yeah.
we used what we earned last year because the interest rate hasn't
Changed a lot.
changed.
Right.
And then we did take and we subtracted some for just an estimate based on our original talk with Arcadia about what
spending on
expenses that they think would be paid.
Front for the schools.
Gotcha.
So we have a little lower just because we'll be fronting some large costs.
That's a 60,000 and the 20, right?
Yeah.
80,000
Yeah.
pulling out.
Yep.
There was an issue that we had 6 months back where we didn't realize it was an issue until we saw it, but there was a prepaid discounts that were occurring versus holding that money and paying monthly and actually earning interest on it.
Yeah, that was with the library, with the schools with transportation. They decided to pay it up front. They'll
Okay.
take a $20,000
They're
discount,
just
I
giving you
think.
guys, but those types
And-
of things, are we looking at those to make
So-
the most sense out of what, you know,
What, we did
financially?
look at that they asked first, and I did a calculation that it would save us 10,000. And Glenn's point was that it cost the town 10,000 and saved the school, and I just looked at it overall and
Right.
not us versus them. That,
So in this year's budget, is it
in
kind
this
of
year's
being looked
budget,
at with the discounts included,
Yeah.
the schools kind of?
That's on the
included?
school side. We can recommend to them, but we can't tell them what to do.
so,
right?
so they did put the discount in to theirs, but they've always paid it, so the way we estimated the income, it shouldn't make a blip in our revenue.
On our side.
Okay.
What they had done in the past is, remember, put the full bill in their budget and take the discount, which gave them $20,000 that was free.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this in front of you, and this is the start of our budget.
This is the one you issued us, well, emailed us a couple hours ago.
Yep.
So,
You have questions?
yeah, I have one right now, and one of the first things you said this evening was when you met with your department heads,
Mhm.
you told them to stay within 1.65%.
Right.
Which I can't argue with the number and the result, but similar to the challenge I had with the Board of Ed, why start with any number as opposed to say, why is 1.65% an appropriate number across the board?
We-
Because if you tell everybody
we-
1.65%, they're gonna come in at 1.649999
Yeah.
regardless.
No,
They
we said
did.
1.65 or lower.
Right.
In keeping with the financial plan,
Mhm.
when you take out the salaries, that is where the number should be to match the financial plan. I think giving people a number or target, if you remember from past years, we get departments that are up 4%,
Yep.
5%, 3%, 3.5%, 3%. No one came in at 1.65. So I think that discipline is a good thing, though we did say to people, and some departments have come in under. Some have a discount.
Mhm.
Some have come to us and said, I need a little bit more. You'll see it in there.
It's a
So-
priority sheet.
Exactly,
that they
yeah,
have.
yeah,
So
okay.
there was,
So we said to each department, you've got something major, come to us.
Okay.
But this is where we want to be.
Okay.
So to be clear on that, you took the 165 plus the salaries was to meet 3. Not-
2 and change.
Yeah.
Or were you trying to get to something lower than 3 to help mitigate the overage on the education side?
No, you know, we have gone after the town budget, and you guys have been there, Mark, you've been there. We have it, you have the book, it's down to the penny. We cannot take any more money out of the town side unless you're gonna go into capital projects or reserves for fire trucks to support the school side to get the final budget number where it is. I'm comfortable with the number that we've given you from the town side, but I'm telling you, that's the number, and it's a good number, the increase. And go through the book, tell me where I can cut.
So, I'm not suggesting.
Or add,
And
I
I-
can also suggest that.
Okay, don't hold your breath. I have about 50 questions, but I'm gonna ask them as we go through the nights with the
Okay.
boards, and hopefully a lot of you answer them and ask them. But just 1 or 2 things real quick. You know, every night I'm gonna ask what's other, what's included in other fees or other revenue. You know I'm gonna ask that. Because I hate other or miscellaneous. Advertising, there's some pretty high advertising budgets. Is that because we had to switch to the News Times for notifications?
Yep.
Okay.
Penny Saver went out of business.
Yeah.
And they were incredibly cheap. And now you go to the News Times and they kind of know, there's a law, we have to publish in a widely distributed local news media.
Right.
And then
Has
you can
anybody
change
looked
them.
into changing that?
Statewide
Yes.
they are.
Yes, we've gone to Steve Harding, I sent a note to Craig Miner on it. The newspaper lobby in Hartford is pretty strong. And Steve has basically said, Steve, I don't think we're gonna get this. He's talked to him about it.
Okay.
What I would like to see is, you can use your town website is now a news source for residents. I think we should be allowed to use our town website. And then Patch does it all the time. They just did it about coronavirus. They just cut and pasted something from the town, put it on the Patch. So you can distribute it out.
And there's 2 things going on with that advertising. That in the current year budget, the 2020 budget, that in 19, there was 1 chunk of $60,000 for advertising at the town clerk. The problem became that
It looks like you broke that into
and
the
we
other
broke it
departments.
into by department because,
Which makes sense.
well, because you have to sign off that this is right, and the town clerk was signing off without actually knowing. So it should be the departments that sign off. So some of the adjustments in advertising is just leveling it because we,
I picked that up. I just wanted to make sure that that's what that.
I also think in doing that, guys are much more careful. Do I take a 3x4 ad, or can I squeeze it down to a 2x4 ad?
Right.
Because it's going to their department budget, and they're very careful about that. I don't think we've gotten a lot of savings from that, but it still keeps them in their mind.
The rest of us stuff, I'll go through.
Eileen, any high
But
levels?
by the way,
Sorry.
good job.
Thank
I
you.
do appreciate the level of.
I was kind of waiting for the department meetings.
Okay. Brianna, any high levels?
do you want me to say what's in?
Dan?
No.
Let's find out any high levels, Dan.
I
Ricky?
haven't heard anything around about the revenue coming in from the state for the schools.
Right
Is that
now,
coming in?
right now,
Do you have a
we've
decent number?
estimated it exactly. Remember, they did a biennial budget and promised they would not make changes? The bonding commission has not met and has not done some of the bonding, so we haven't yet received some of the money, but we expect to get everything that we have, and it's in here on the revenue
Do you
side.
feel like there's any risk there since Lamont didn't get
I
his,
don't, you never know what the legislature does. You know, they cut us to 0, and then they brought us back up, and then they cut us here and cut us there. But right now, I think they're much more steady state. They understand the pain it's caused every single town and city, and so I don't think they're gonna touch it. So I'm comfortable with the conversations I've had with Steve and other legislators that our revenue figures are pretty good.
Okay. Marcia and Steve, is there anything in here in Soon area that you think that we would ask questions about that we didn't really cover tonight?
Yeah,
Like an
we-
area of, gee, there's gonna be a hiccup, and instead of us asking 10 questions, can you clarify it now maybe?
On their
We-
package, the
Yeah.
very last page.
Yeah, if you look, we listed all those things that we think are a little odd, a little quirky, or that you might go, why is that that way?
The top half of the last page, and this, you had asked us for. The top half are the departments where they exceeded 1.65%. that, so we say what percent they came in on the department submitted budget and what that dollar was. For example, the assessor was over 1.65%, but it was $32. That, so the big reasons for being over the 1.65%, again, on the department submitted, is that we're grossing up the revenue for senior trips. The other one was the HRRA, that they're changing the way that they do things, and I think we talked about that at one of the budget presentation, the budget to actual discussions.
Can I just talk about, HRRA used to give us a rebate from the haulers that they license. They made a decision to, instead of doing that, to then, we would get $5,000 to $6,000 in fees, and we run an electronic waste recycling day here in Brookfield. They decided to give each town that does a recycling day $10,000 towards that cost. So I think that's a win. We're net to the good for $4,000. The New Milford Recycling Center, I sent a letter to Pete Bass, the mayor of New Milford, 2 days ago. I have two issues with fees that he's charging us. Last year, he raised our fees for recycling by 50% overnight. He did it after you guys had pretty much finished your budget, almost to the end. He's right there. So we didn't have a lot of chance to do anything about it. And on the probate court, this year they doubled the rent to the probate court, which is split amongst all the towns. I wrote him a letter and I said, that's not fair, it's not reasonable. We're willing to give you what we gave you last year plus 5%. I also told him on the recycling center, what's happening is there's 3 towns, Sherman, Brookfield, and New Milford are in a recycling center. We are 5% of his volume. Sherman is 8% of his volume. Sherman and Brookfield are paying 66 2/3 of the entire cost of the recycling center. I'm sorry.
Can we move to Danbury?
Yeah. And he's also, I admire the chutzpah here. They're depreciating the land and trying to charge us for it. Land doesn't lose value. 20 years from now, if you shut it down, you're gonna be able to sell that piece of property, pretty much at least for what you pay for it this year. And you're depreciating it on a straight line basis over 20 years. I'm sorry. I'm not. So I told them, we're gonna pay you, we're 5%. Now, I do understand you have some sunk costs. You have equipment, you have dumpsters, you have other stuff there that you bought and are sitting there, whether one piece of recycling goes through or not. So we'll pay 15%, 3 times the volume that we have. We're 5% of the volume, and
So
I
you're
think
waiting to
that's.
hear back on that?
I have not, and my guess is I will not. So with this, I'm gonna do it by fiat. Now, we have left the fees right now. I'm waiting to see what he says, right? The fees for recycling and for the probate court are as asked by New Milford. So we can lower those if we're willing to make that decision. Now, if we go to 15%, and that's what we tell him we're gonna pay, and he says, you're gone, right? I'm working with Bethel, maybe we can use their recycling, but I just don't think this is fair, that we pay 33% of the cost and are 5% of the trips. And also, every time, a lot of towns, when you go to recycle, it's included, whatever you're recycling, unless like you've got something with Freon in it. But if you're bringing an appliance, it's free, right? New Milford charges for almost every single thing. So I estimated we're paying $36 a trip, and then our residents are also paying once they get there.
And you're,
Yeah.
and you're buying, is it $10 for a sticker to go up there?
Yeah, we charge $10 for a sticker, but we get to keep that $10.
Yeah.
We issue about 550, 600 stickers a year, so we get $6,000 in revenue. It's just, the cost allocation just isn't fair. And towns need to work with each other. We're having the same problem with regional animal control.
No, it's.
New Fairfield wants to pull out. If they pull out, all of their expenses get distributed amongst the other towns. And if that happens, they have 4 full-time officers. I've said to Curtis Reed, who's the chairman, you know, we gotta rethink the staffing on this. Do we need that many staff if New Fairfield pulls out? Right? But in the regional animal control, we're pretty much, except for New Fairfield, working together to come up with a solution that works for everybody without really harming any one town. In the case of recycling and probate, we're just being told this is your new cost. I'm sorry, you've got to negotiate.
Any other questions? All right, we gave Harry an opportunity to talk about the school budget. Sue, you want to say something from your side?
I voted in favor of it. I thought with the 817 that Steve had taken out after conversations that we had, specifically health insurance and other cost savings that we think they will find if they drill a little bit deeper.
Okay.
So I think we're okay. I did not want to take any more off the table. They're looking at, big budgets with their special ed. I don't want to take anything away from any of our students. So I personally would like to keep it as it is. Obviously, if you find something that's something different, but I felt comfortable with what we were coming from.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Anybody else? Marcia, you want to bring something? Anything?
I got nothing.
Steve, you want to bring something that you haven't thought about?
Just one thing, I agree with Sue on the school budget. I think we should look very, very carefully about it. And one of the reasons I did not want to change it at all, we gave them a big cut, and they are gonna have some, we know this, some significant expenses. So before this board cuts it anymore, you'd want to have some very good reasons to do it. And that's why I'm
And
hoping
answers from them.
they provide all the answers to the questions so you can get a better idea of where we are.
And again, part of my problem is, how can we make that decision when we don't have the answers to the questions? I mean,
Harry, I'm not disagreeing. I just wanted to give you all the opportunity to explain your positions, on TV here for everybody, so we can make the best decisions. I don't think any of us are, none of us are in disagreement trying to make the best decision.
And I told, Steve and Sue, I understand their position, and I, spending 14 years on the Board of Education, I am sympathetic towards that, and I am a huge supporter of education, but I think with the number, the amount of money that we're talking about, there needs to be more clarity.
John, you want to bring anything? You want to bring something to the table?
No, just in terms of the school budget, any cuts, they require them to begin to manage that cut. So any additional changes to what the board of selectmen is bringing to you, you're gonna have to hold them to the line, you're gonna have to really dig deep and take suggestions from the board about where to look for savings, because it's the name of the game, managing the budgets.
If I could just, one more thing. In your package, it shows you the cuts that were made by the first selectman and why, and then it shows you the cuts or changes made by the board of selectmen and why. And it also discusses center fire and the issues we have there and why we achieved the budget that we did. We are asking that a contingency put aside for center fire, pending them giving us more information on supporting documentation. We want them to be fully funded, but we need the supporting documentation to make sure that we are getting the right number.
Gotta hold everybody to the same standard. If
Yes.
we're sending pages of questions to the school, we have to send them the same questions to the fire. Absolutely have to do it.
We
That's a good way to put it.
we've had about 10 meetings with them, and,
It's working much better than last year. We're getting there. It's just changing perception and changing how you work at this. And I've said this to these guys, so I'm not surprised, I don't think it would come as a surprise. If the town is providing 100% of your operating expenses, from an accounting standpoint and from a financial standpoint only, you are a department of the town. And we need to hold you to the same standard that we hold every other single department. And it's, to Dan's point, the same level of scrutiny, the same level of oversight. We're not trying to tell you what to do. But what we are doing is saying, we need to know what that is and how you're spending our residents'
And I
money.
think to our point, today, when the three of us met, we would have been happy to have given them more money if they had shown us, why. But it was not that clear.
All right, then I think we move on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Hearing none.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
I was looking at the summary page, it has 7:30.
Sure, I'll see what I can do.